I've been waiting for all these years is something that Lucas, like, we've been talking about this so
This is
much.
it.
What is your thoughts on East Coast style? Like, honest opinion.
Yeah.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Flip Up Podcast. Today, we are joined by Jack Wurth. This is our very first guest who is on the West Coast. He marched ensembles you may know: Pacific Crest, RCC, just to name a few. So, yeah, here's Jack.
Yeah, and before we get started, just want to say thanks to everyone because as of now, as of recording this, we are at 100 followers on Instagram, a little bit over. So thanks to all you guys and keep sharing it with your friends. Without further ado, here's Jack.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Sweet. So, Jack, go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your marching history. You can start anywhere from high school and then, to where you're at now.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess starting from high school, I actually marched. I did high school marching band. I did it for 5 years actually, because my high school had a program where you could do it as an eighth grader in middle school, and it was treated like a seventh period. So I did it for a total of 5 years because I thought that was something I should do. And then I did winter drumline all 4 years of high school as well. And then right after I graduated, I marched Pacific Crest, and I marched there 2016, 17, and 19. And then I did Dark Sky 17. Um, and then the next drum corps that I marched was Mandarins in 18. And then I also did RCC 18, 19, and 20.
Dang. Yeah. So that is quite the resume. Uh,
Stacked.
yeah. More years than me and Lucas combined.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, probably. Um, so you mentioned Mandarins for 1 year. What's kind of been the experience from like Pacific Crest and Mandarins?
Um, yeah, so that was kind of a bit of a decision for me because like I had already marched 2 years at Pacific Crest, so that was like kind of like my home. But I heard that in 18, the Mandarin Simline was getting new staff. They were getting John Nguyen, who previously marched Vanguard, and he was going to be teaching there, and then Xavier Brackett was going to be teaching there, who I actually went to high school with, and then he taught me how to play cymbals. And then we both ended up marching RCC 18 together. So
Wow.
I've known him for a very long time. When he was teaching us, I'm like, oh, that's like the dream team over there. So I was very like torn, like, do I like stay like with the home team and just kind of help that grow, or like do I saw it as more of a more of a selfish decision, and like for me to sort of, continue my learning and experience. Do I leave to march somewhere else to, learn and grow as a cymbal player and performer? And I ultimately chose to do that. And I am I don't regret the decision to leave. Obviously, it always sucks to leave a group that you've been with for a while for something different. But I am very glad for the people and experiences and information that I've learned from my time at Mandarins. And it definitely was a like shift, both in like the symbol line and also just like the group as a whole, which was really scary at first, but ultimately like it was really nice to have a whole different perspective of like how people go about things and approach them, which was a nice little breath of fresh air for me.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that me and Lucas, well, sorry, I've experienced. Lucas would have been if COVID didn't hit the fan, but that was something that I've experienced with Scouts and Colts. Is just like getting two different like experiences. Like it definitely like you learn a lot in one ensemble, but then, or I'd say drum corps, my bad, but then you go to the other drum corps, which in my case was Colts, and like I feel like I got this whole other perception of cymbal playing, like just education and like the way they approach things. It's like completely different. At any corps you go to, let's say I'll keep using this example, but like Scouts, like you're not going to get the exact same thing at Colts, and same thing with like Pacific Crest. Like it's going to be across any ensemble or drum corps. Keep saying ensemble, but any drum corps, it's always going to be a different experience regardless. Different food, different teaching style, different intensity. I mean, you hear like myths like I don't want to throw drum corps under the name, but you hear about said drum corps works them to like God knows how late, and some drum corps give like a hefty amount of free days. So everyone runs differently. Which actually, I'm kind of curious in terms of Pacific Crest and Mandarins. Which one would you say? Uh, hmm. I don't know how to word this, but like, which one would you say gave you the better learning experience personally?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I mean, I got like a lot of, I guess, like big lessons or a lot of information from like both places in each year that I've marched. But I think like overall, I definitely remember, or I definitely felt that I learned a lot more from my time at Mandarins. Yeah, there was definitely
Interesting.
like a lot of things that I sort of realized in my time there that I was, I guess, a little um, ignorant or blind to beforehand.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like at Scouts, like for me, that was like the big learning of like the basics, how to have the drum corps mentality. And then when I got the Colts, it was like, yeah, keep applying those things. But then like I feel like that's where I learned like the details of everything I know. Like not saying I didn't learn the details before, but it definitely was like, let's focus more on just the bigger picture. But then like, then you go to another corps, or maybe it's just a second year experience, but there definitely was a lot more details that I learned at Colts. So yeah. Um, so let's actually talk a little bit more about your experience at Pacific Crest, because you were saying how you came straight out of high school. Were there any like connections you had?
Yeah, so the reason I went to my first PC audition is because one of my friends in high school, he was a year below me, so he was a junior when I was a senior. He played quads at the time, and he was saying that him and a bunch of our other friends from high school, like, hey, we're all going out to audition for Pacific Crest. I'm like, cool, good luck with that. Like, hope you do well. And he's like, thanks, you should come too. I was like, why? Because in high school, I for marching band, I played clarinet, so I was a winds kid. And then for winter drumline, I played vibraphone for my first 2 years, and then switched to cymbals for my junior and senior year. So at the time that he was going to audition, really had only done like a year and a half of Scholastic A indoor and cymbals, which I did not feel was qualification to audition for a world-class cymbal line. And I told him that, and he was like, "Nah, it's cool. It's whatever. Don't worry about it. Just come on. We want to have like a group to go with us." And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And then so I said yes, and I went, and I got to the audition, and I was freaking out, man. I was like, "There's so many people." I was like, "I am not qualified to be here." And then once they like the audition started, and I'm like, "All right, everyone break off by section," and like literally everyone left because they didn't say where the symbol should go, and it was just me and one other person that was like standing 10 feet away, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, I guess this is it. And so it was just the two of us, and we pretty much just had like a one-on-one like clinic pretty much with the tech, and then I just got a contract that weekend. And
Wow.
I just like to think it was like, shoot, there are only two guys, we got to contract them before they leave because we need something.
I would have been
um
terrified if it was just me and one other person.
and
Just
I was panicking.
yeah, because
Yeah.
then it's just like all focused on you. But I mean, I guess it worked out in your favor because you got that spot.
I did, and I was worried too because at my high school, like we're just a Scholastic A, so we're just like just use whatever we have. So the symbols that I we had were just like super old. 18-inch Zildjian classical orchestrals. And the only reason I knew they were classical orchestrals is because if you held it in the right light, you could see where the logo was,
Oh yeah.
but it has
Yeah.
long been gone. But there's like the faint remnants of where it used to be. I'm like, that looks like a C. Must be a classic orchestral. But at Pacific Crest, they used 20-inch Sabians. So I had, and I brought my cymbals. I'm like, oh, I don't know what the situation is going to be, so I'll just bring my own. And he was like, oh no, we're not using those. We'll use, you can use ours. I'm like, oh, okay. So like, first time auditioning for a world class group, first time using 20-inch cymbals, and me with my skinny little arms was an experience.
That's so funny. Like, Lucas, what have we been saying since literally day one of the podcast? What's the one thing we say about no matter where you march, it always works out, you know?
That is true. Yeah. Um, well, I mean, I think it was funny because I know for me, like the feeling of you show up to an audition camp and like you kind of, I definitely, when I went to my first camps, I was always like, oh, do I bring cymbals? Do I not? I think I ended up bringing cymbals to my first camp. I went to Jersey Surf Camp, but then like that moment when they bring out their own and you realize that the ones you've been using have been like baby mode and they bring out the super heavy ones and you're just thinking like, oh shit, this is gonna be bad. Or when I went to scouts and they brought out the 20s and I just had to feel like how big they were. I was like, oh, this is super uncomfortable. I'm not used to this. But I mean, it's pretty cool learning how to use different symbols and how they differ because I know in high school you really just use the same thing all the time and then you don't realize that there's actually differences between them.
I didn't know that you used 20s at Scouts. That's actually surprising to me.
Wait, 20 is at Scouts? Wait, we didn't use 20
Or
at
no, we used
Scouts.
19s.
Oh, okay. I was
My
like
bad.
20s at Scouts. I'm like, oh, snap.
No,
Okay.
that is I guess going off of West Coast, that's the one thing East Coast does not do is like I think 18 is like if you're lucky 19, but like I can't name one East Coast line that does 20s. Like I which to bring this up now, we are going to talk about the differentiations with East Coast and West Coast. So we'll definitely talk about cymbal size, but going off of the ideas we were saying before, it was like we were saying before in previous episodes, like just to give you some background, Jack, like me and Lucas, like same deal. Like we were in high school and like, you know, like for me, like we started off A class and yes, I got to open class level, but it's one of those things like you start somewhere and like, you know, like you can't just there's always an opportunity, you know, as long as you just keep working for it and don't let the mindset of everything else around you get in the way.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many lines are willing to take people that aren't necessarily at the level of years past just because of the mindset that they have. And a lot of people would be surprised at how many groups actually have open spots and that they could use people. Like I'm sure Jack, when you went to Pacific Crest, you had no idea that they were looking for cymbal players.
Yeah, I had no idea. Like I just went because my friend told me to.
Yeah.
That was that was it.
I mean, taking that first step, that's how you get in.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's funny also we were bringing up cymbals, like the cymbals we use starting out. I think mine were I can't even remember the names. They might have been concert orchestral. I don't remember, but what I do remember is the uh the people oh my god, I can't remember the name. I was a trumpet player in high school, but the percussion, but like the people on okay, there you go, the rack, the people over by the
Oh, for
rack.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely took the cymbals off to the rack and used them in rehearsal, so that gives you context of the cymbals I used starting off. So
Nice.
but we were fortunate though in what was it, my sophomore year or junior, I want to say my sophomore year, the Caballeros, the DCI core, or not DCI, DCA core,
Hmm.
I think they cut their cymbal line or they got new cymbals, and we had like a bunch of percussion staff who were working at cab, so we were fortunate enough to just get their old cymbals. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, so I ended up using, what was it, it was Zildjians. They were 19 inches, can't
Geez, in high
remember.
school.
Yeah, I just remember them being heavy. I was skinny, dude.
I think I remember at the Mason camp, there's another Soko kid. He showed up with the big Soko symbols, and I was thinking like, Soko really uses those big ass symbols. But
Yeah.
at my high school, we always had like the super old ancient, what was it, the stadiums, where
Oh
it's like you can tell just
yeah.
picking them up, you're like, oh yeah, they've had these for
Hmm.
like way too long.
Yeah, I've never personally used stadiums. I used them once at a Pulse experience camp that I went to in high school. But yeah, those are fun.
Yeah. Now thinking about it, sophomore year, I believe they were stadiums, 19-inch stadiums, if I remember. But still, here I am, Now I know the names of all these different symbols now, which okay, I guess kind of segueing into the next topic. What symbols did you use at Pacific Crest, RCC, Mandarins?
Yeah, so in my marching experience, both drum corps and indoor, I've really only used two like pairs of or two different types of symbols because when I first marched with Pacific Crest in 16 and 17, they were sponsored by Sabian. And we used the oh no, I forget I'm forgetting what they're called. But I think they were the Sabian. I want to say they were stadiums, but it's not like the stadium exact. But oh man, I'm totally blanking on the name. I'm sorry. But I like to think it was like the Sabian equivalent of a Zildjian stadium, just big, thick, hefty symbols.
Oh yeah,
And I used mediums my first year in 16, and then in 17, I got bumped up to heavies. But I used those at Pacific Crest, and then indoor, like pretty much from that point on, after that season, Zildjian classic orchestrals 20s, just continually. There was a brief period where I used 20-inch V&Es at RCC because we were just in between cymbal shipments, and that was just what we had left over. But overall, just classic orchestral 20-inch from Zildjian.
Yeah. So I guess on the East Coast, we use medium thins. Nothing like 20-inch, but we use from like 18 to 19-inch medium thin Zildjian. We
the
use
Viennese.
V&Es. Yeah. In my experience, I've used both Sabian and Zildjian. If I had to choose a favorite, I think Zildjian, you have a lot more control, but I think Sabian, sound quality wise, at least from my experience, but and then also some lines, but at least this is what we do at George Mason. We also have 17 inches, so like
Oh
for
yeah.
smaller arms, and that kind of just helps with visuals because someone like me who has bigger arms, like sometimes visually there's not a lot of arm space, so sometimes 17 inches if they have smaller arms per
Yeah, right,
se.
because Jess used 17s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jess and Molly.
yeah, I met her at a Vanguard audition once,
That's
and she said she
true.
used 17s. I'm like, what? I've never heard of that. Something smaller than 18?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, hell, on the West Coast, some smaller than 20s. My God.
Yeah.
I mean that definitely is a joke, but 19s are actually relatively common. Usually, and it's not to usually the girls will use 19s, and it's not that they can't use 20s, but usually it's more usually just a proportion thing. More often than not, it's just 19s just work better. But definitely on the West Coast, like 20s if you can, just always. But like if you just physically can't, like 19s are very common as well. You'd really only see 18s if you got like a tiny, tiny person, but I don't really know of anyone that used at least in the independent world level, I don't really know, can't think of anyone on the West Coast that use 18s.
Wow. Okay, guys, so here we go. This is the segue now. We've already kind of been talking about it, but this is the moment that I've been waiting for all these years. This is something that Lucas, like, we've been talking about this so
This is
much.
it.
We are now going to talk about East Coast and West Coast, our thoughts and kind of differentiating the two. This is something that like you hear or you see, but I like this has been like something that we're curious, like opinions and thoughts on. So I guess the first thing we already kind of talked about the cymbals, but let's just jump right into the style. What is your thoughts on East Coast style? Like honest opinion.
Yeah. I definitely was worried, like when you messaged him, like, oh no, this is gonna come up. I'm like, how am I gonna say this and not just have the entire East Coast just come for me?
This is it. Okay, no, we never actually like have East Coast and West Coast just talking to each other. It's always so separate. But this is the moment when both sides realize that it's pretty much the same thing. It's just two different styles.
Yeah. So my personal opinion, which you can take it as it is, you can tell me I'm wrong and I don't know what I'm talking about, and that's fair. Personally, I am a fan of the visual aspect. I do think it's really cool. Um, like just like as a viewing member, I very much appreciate the creativity and like the range of what you guys can do with offhand and fucking like throwing things in the air, and like I would not even begin to try and approach that. But I am not a fan of the East Coast's approach to sound quality, personally, at least from my experience. I think for me, that's where the biggest divide is. Like visually, I mean, that's cool. I mean, as long as it's clean and it looks cool, like I'm sold. Um, but yeah, like the sound quality is the biggest divide for me, and just the difference. And like I've thought about it. I also obviously haven't like talked about it, but and I like to think that it's like a various few things. Like obviously the symbols you use matter, and then your approach matters too, as to like the sound that you produce. But yeah, that's the biggest like divide for me is the sound quality aspect of East Coast to West Coast cymbal playing.
Yeah, so when we actually had Mason on, he talked a lot about this because he marched West Coast and East Coast.
Yeah.
But we are kind of talking about our experiences practicing sound quality. And obviously, it's definitely not as much as what you guys do over there because he was saying that you'd have like a full hour block of just like playing one note, making sure
Oh
it's
yeah.
absolutely perfect. Whereas over here, like to our fault, we do not practice it as much. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, you kind of just like you get these points and then they make contact and oh yeah, that sounds good. That's good. Keep going. But there's definitely that disconnect and it's always the one thing that's brought up because you guys super into sound quality. You get the big cymbals with like the beautiful concert crashes and all that. You have the concert cymbals. It's like specifically made for good sounds. Whereas over here we get like the really thin ones that you can throw around. But I mean, as Mason said in the other podcast, to have both sides kind of, or not, I guess not both sides, but just having more attention to sound quality over here and more like visual over there, just like that little connect is something that hasn't happened yet, but should.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, like I and you said like out like hours of like a whole hour like subs of just one crash is I have done too many of those. And yeah, that's been like multiple days in a row. Like I remember at Mandarins, like I had to learn a new technique and we had this super in-depth breakdown for just a dead crash. And we would just do that for days on end and it took me forever to like figure it out. But we just spent an entire session like, all right, doing it again. I'm like, okay, here we go. Because like it's definitely a much more focus on sound quality, and like at least from my perspective, my perspective of it is because um, like we are music. I see us as musicians first and foremost because we are playing music, and so that's why I definitely like subscribe to and also teach like very much focusing on the sound quality because that's what I see as more important. Visuals are obviously cool too, but like it's got to sound good before we can like throw in visuals, right? Because if something like sounds awful, but you got a cool flip in there, I'm like, yeah, there's a cool flip, but what was that crash you just played before that? So like, it's for me, it's definitely sound quality over visuals. But of course, you get to the point where then you can just have both at that high level.
Yeah. So I guess talking about the different philosophies, I guess you could call it, where it's on sound quality for West Coast, on the East Coast, it's more on the visual side, which we all know that. But here's kind of the philosophy, right? You're in a battery, right? And the pit's playing all these crashes, and not to say sacrifice sound quality, but a lot of that gets washed away, especially in the pit, at least from our philosophy. But the way I kind of think about it, and Lucas, you can obviously speak differently. I kind of think of us almost similar to the color guard, almost in the sense that what visually happens on the floor might be more, I would say, more effective. And because like let's say like you're at a show, right? And there's a giant stadium. You're so far away, right? They're gonna visually see those things way more clear than they're gonna hear the crashes, and that's just what I personally believe, which is why I personally favor what visually happens more cleanliness wise. But then going off of what you're saying about sound quality, that's the one thing that exactly what I told Mason. Like that's the one thing that I admire about the West Coast is you guys have really good sound quality. And I can just picture if you just have an East Coast tech and a West Coast tech, just get together and have a baby. That's like the ideal Cymbal line. You take the sound quality and you take the visual aspects, throw them together. Cause like, and this is the one thing that I completely like would bash about East Coast is we do visual things. And the big thing we always say is like, you never sacrifice sound quality for visual. But I feel like now it's definitely gotten to a point now where we do visuals and it can sacrifice the sound quality. Like, um anything where it's like not on the strap, but we call it like juggling, which is basically like when the strap is completely not on the hand.
Right.
But like in 19 at Colts, we had this tap choke and we did this like pop juggle from the tap choke and like trying to get that right like contact point and the right sound quality. Like it automatically gets choked off when you grab it. So like normally you think like tap choke and then like the sound quality gets choked off from your body, but then here we are doing it, catching it with the hand. So
Right.
it's about experimenting with ways you can produce that same sound quality, but with different parts of your body.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I remember because like I've never done East Coast, but like I've like watched like a majority of like the Seavine and East Coast videos just because like that's the only kind of like content there is. And also I find it interesting. So like yeah, I've definitely seen like you like videos where you just do a weird chapter like, whoa, that was cool, but like I didn't really hear anything. But it looked cool and it was clean.
Yeah.
So I guess that works.
Yeah, we definitely have some notes. I mean, I almost want to put like quotations around it because sometimes it's really pushing it when we call them notes. Like I know in Mason we had this one sizz that we had a name for it, but it was definitely like it was like sizzing from one position to another while the hand was like, I think it was like a 4 finger grip where it's not totally Garfield, so there's not as much control. And it was like they were like they called it a sizz. We told the techs we were playing a sizz, but we all knew that we weren't playing a sizz. We were kind of just like a like in between positions. So points like that are definitely sacrificing sound quality a little bit. But again, going to what Jaden said, we kind of grow up believing that, and it may be bad, but we kind of grow up believing that like, oh, no one's really gonna care because they're probably not gonna hear it, and everyone's always talking about how the pit can play the same notes as us. So that's one like I guess ideology that we grow up with. I'm sure if we switch sides and grew up in California, you grew up over here, we'd like have completely different beliefs.
Yeah.
But it's just what we grew up with and what we've been surrounded with and what we've been taught and all that. So it just differs there, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And uh yeah, the one thing I was just going to say real quick, just to kind of sum it up, we also do care a lot about sound quality, but it's one of those things where it's like you put it on the spectrum and we'd say we'd favor more visually, but that's to say if we sound like ass, that's still not acceptable. You know what I'm saying? Like we do
Yeah.
still go for good sound quality, but we definitely, if we were in subs for about 3 hours, we definitely would focus more on the visual aspect, or like if we're like doing parts and like, you know, splitting and stuff like that, we definitely would favor more towards the playing in that sense, or if something sounds really bad.
Yeah, but
Right.
it's not like West Coast levels of sound quality where it's like Da Vinci made that crash. Like, I don't know why I said Da Vinci, like Beethoven made that crash or something.
Yeah. You know, I definitely understand that. Like, it's obviously not to that you just like throw sound quality out the window. Although, I mean, and no shade to any lines, but there definitely are some groups. I'm like, you definitely just threw it out the window. But
For sure, for sure.
that's okay. That you do you, you do your own gig. But I guess like on the topic of like not being heard, I guess that's why like obviously we use the bigger symbols so you can hear us. Because like in my experience, like like the larger the diameter, obviously the more sound it can produce, and the heavier the cymbal, the darker and richer the sound, which allows it to travel farther, which is sort of the mentality of having like huge giant cymbals for drum corps, because you do have that larger space that you have to fill up. Um, and like I've like sat on the audience and like watched like I don't think I ever saw Academy back when they had a cymbal line, but like I've seen Vanguard and like I've like watching the cymbal line, I see him play a crash and I hear it, I'm like, there you go. Like so it definitely can be done. And like yes, the pit can play it, and like the pit's got more cymbals, so if they play a crash, obviously they're gonna drown us out. But like when they're not playing crashes, you can hear ours. And I it's funny that you say like they're never gonna hear us. And like for drum corps, that's usually the case, but for indoor, it's always the opposite. I'm like, was that too loud? Because
Yeah.
like in indoor, because we just use the same symbols and the same like the exact same approach. So you're just still going to ham, but you're now on a tarp. So like, hey cymbals, that's too loud. You're like, oh right, sorry, we'll take it down. Although usually it's like it's too loud, get rid of it. I'm like, no.
Yeah, we have the exact same thing where it's like it's too loud, let's just get rid of it. And then so we have like a giant visual phrase, and then they're like, yeah, symbols, we're gonna have you guys actually turn around, or it's like, yeah, we're gonna just change the drill here. And then it's like, well, this visual is now in the book. We call it the archive, you know?
In the
Ironically enough,
memory
we had a
archive.
show, yeah, 2018. But yeah, like we have some lines have like archives where they just throw a bunch of visuals and they just keep it in the stock. Like for example, in 2019 after the summer, we had visuals just on standby to bring to our WGI ensembles, you know? So shoot, there was something I was gonna say about sound quality, and that was the one thing about West Coast I admire, just like the dark, and it's like the symbol choice. But then now talking from our perspective, visually wise, it's the same exact thing. Like from our standpoint, we can tell when like a West Coast line like visually doesn't look good, if that makes sense, more so
Yeah.
than we can like
Ooh.
with like sound quality. So what other stuff? Because like believe it or not, there's a lot of similarities between West Coast and East Coast. I think it's just really it comes down to philosophy. If like we're being honest here, like we do the exact same things. Like our purpose is basically the exact same. It's just you have one that favors more sound quality, and then the other that favors more visually. And I think that's just the biggest differentiation between the two. Like I said, you have a baby between them. Like that's your perfect cymbal player right there. Maybe we'll say from a 20-inch to an 18-inch, you get that 19-inch baby with like
19-inch baby. Some big baby.
That's a hefty baby.
Oh, actually, I do have a question. I've always wondered this.
Okay.
Do you guys on the West Coast meme the East Coast?
Yeah.
Oh, let's hear some jokes. I want to hear some
Yeah.
memes.
I
This is
mean
gonna be good.
it's not I don't think like we directly do it or like the biggest thing is I mean I don't know if you were a part of like this, were you in like the Facebook group like the Symbolism
Dude,
5.0?
oh my
Yeah,
god.
like that whole moment and the whole cup
Ernie
stacking thing.
Ernie's Kingdom.
Well, Ernie, and then like the whole cup stacking situation and all that.
I vaguely remember the cups.
Oh yeah, it was just it was so I
Oh,
don't
I
remember who,
remember
but
it
like the
now.
West Coast, it was just like a discussion that turned into a little something else between an East Coast and a West Coast person, and
Yeah,
so, like
that was
very
brutal.
loosely, someone like said that like offhand or East Coast is it just the same as cup stacking in terms of just as a random skill. And so there's a brief moment where like we were just like, someone would like take off their cymbal, like, oh, you're doing a little cup stacking over there. All right, cool. Like, so, and we would just call like we just cup stacking was just synonymous with offhand or East Coast for a good minute. So that was a good joke that we had. And then also one thing that I've done is that I did this a lot in high school just because I was a stupid high school student. And we'd be trying to come up with visuals or something. And my tech, he he wasn't a fan of offhand either. I'm like, what should we do for a visual? I'm like, well, what if we did this? And I like throw it off and just start spinning it around my wrist. He's like, no, we're not doing that. I'm like, come on, just to make fun of him. So I would use it as a joke, just like, well, what if we did this and then we could go into that? And he's like, no, no.
Dude, I got you guys. Free meme right here.
Okay.
Professional yo-yo players. That's what you can call us from now on.
Dude, you call us you call us also like what, circus clowns with their juggling?
Yeah, circus clowns there when you got like the stick and the symbol on
Oh
top.
yeah. Well, that's cool. I've done that. I just think that's just a cool thing to do. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, and also with Infinity's 19 show circus clowns is definitely
Oh yeah.
something to use because they were
Oh
literally
yeah, that's
juggling
true.
their symbols.
Yeah. And then what was it? Mystique, what was it? Fantastique or something like
Fantastic,
that?
yeah.
Yeah,
They did that whole thing.
yeah, the symbols with
Oh
the
yeah,
stick. That was so cool.
just a bunch of party tricks.
Yeah, honestly, in terms of East Coast visually, that's so like over its level. Like it's crazy they came up with that back then.
Yeah,
It,
that's
it, it
cool.
is really cool. It is impressive, but we definitely will poke fun at it, especially when they just drop a symbol. I'm like, ah, that's what you get for doing offhand.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, it is always embarrassing when you drop a symbol.
But
It's even
okay.
worse for us because ours are on our hands and you drop it like, that's not supposed to happen.
Do you guys like also like break through straps a lot, like just
Oh,
from doing flips a
absolutely.
lot? Yep.
Oh,
Okay.
100%. In 18 at Mandarins, we had the leaderboard, and it was whoever broke the most straps. And I think if I didn't win, I was like second. I at least wasn't last, which was all I cared about because my tech was like, oh, whoever wins gets the person who was last like has to do something the leader tells him to do. So I'm like, as long as I'm not last, and that's fine. And I wasn't, so I'm like, we're good.
Nice, nice. You guys use leather, right?
Yeah, we just use the standard leather or leather. I don't know if it's genuine leather
Or
anymore,
pleather,
but
but
yeah, but the leather is those and straps.
have you used nylon? Do you have thoughts on it?
I used them once as a joke because we it was at Pacific Crest when we were still with Sabian, and at Pacific Crest, Sabian treated us so well. It was wild. We got
Oh yeah, Sabian is the best with that
oh, it,
stuff.
it was fabulous. We got 3 pairs per person every year, brand new. And I'm like, what is this? Like coming from a high school where I've been using the same pair of symbols that have been used like for millennium before me. I'm like, I just get 3 pairs all myself. I'm like, oh, this is
Yeah.
fabulous.
That's exactly what we had at Colts. It was I had a show pair, I had a like rehearsal pair, and then I had just like a rehearsal pair. I don't know. It's just
Oh, yeah,
like
ours was we had our finals pair. That's what we used our last ones. It was like
oh
the
yeah,
nice,
that's
nice,
right. Yeah, yeah,
shiny.
yeah. So it was rehearsal pair, a performance pair, and then we we saved a pair just for finals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when we would get those symbols, they just default came with the nylon straps.
Mm.
And in 17, we're like, what if we just tried these just for just to see it out? And we're like, all right, sure. And then we used them and we're like, ooh, these are kind of weird. And then we were playing with the new symbols. And then my section leader at the time, the knot just slipped and the brand new symbol just edged down onto concrete. And we're like, all right, we're taking these off right now. We're going back to live. This is not.
Yeah, it's slippery. What was the thing we did at Scouts, Jaden? The was it the Schlurp? The
Oh yeah,
Grand Schlurp or
we called
something?
it the Grand Slurp, which was basically like we
Okay.
had it on our hand and we'd pull
Uh-huh.
our hand out like that and grab the edge of the symbol.
Yeah, because it's so
Oh
like
wow.
it's so smooth. You kind of just like you're
You
in
could just.
Garfield and you just like grab it at the bottom, but with
Oh
like the
wow.
symbol just staying in place. It was pretty
Damn.
funny looking.
That's I could not even imagine to do that with a leather strap.
So on the East Coast, well, two things. The first thing I'll say on the East Coast, we don't really like leather because it can get sticky. You know,
Sure.
the nylon you have a lot more room to do visuals. But here's the thing: on the East Coast now, if we're talking about memes, The
Wait, I was
East
about to ask, like,
Coast.
do you meme us? You have to.
I have a
Yeah,
good one.
no.
I
I
have a
gotta
good
know.
one.
Oh,
Oh, no, no. I have a staple right here. I
all right.
think the biggest one is like we meme your guys' intensity. So like for example, always being like this and doing the like how you guys like
The
smack each
slam.
other on.
Oh, hip slams. Yeah.
Yeah, we do that. We do the intensity. We'll like talk to each other really intense sometimes. My big thing, like if I'm like trying to mimic a West Coast visual, like
Hmm.
I'll always is this called the Silver Surfer?
Just the surfer.
The
Yeah.
Surfer? Yeah.
Hmm.
I'll resort to that first thing as a visual.
It's
So
iconic though. It is
Yeah.
iconic. You
yeah.
gotta
It's
admit.
a classic Vanguard visual. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my memes. It may be, I don't know, but
Just go for it.
so I think I said this in high school,
Okay.
but I was like, yo, do you think in the West Coast they're doing like a flip exercise and they're like, wait, do that again. They're like in the middle of the exercise, like, what did you just do? Do it again. Yo, we could put that in the show. It's our visual because like it's just a flip.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, and it's very much like, wait, what did you do? Wait, do that again? Because we're just like, we just see something and we're like, we don't know. It's like, wait, do that again. But I mean, I don't know. I'm never gonna turn down a good flip in a show. There's nothing wrong with just
Oh,
a
absolutely,
good old flip.
absolutely.
But you are absolutely not wrong. Like that's a good flip.
Yeah,
Oh, we could put that there. All right, and it's just up. And I'm like, yeah, that's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we are actually getting towards the end of the episode. This has been like super awesome, by the way. Just this whole episode, I think it's going to be really great for people to see East Coast and West Coast actually talking about each other.
Real quick though, I have one last question
Mm.
before we
Ooh,
ask the last question. Have you ever tried doing East Coast visuals?
Yeah, I have. I've just been bored, and like I only have 20s, and I'll just be bored, just like because I think it's interesting. So I'm like, how do you do that? And so I would just like try and use it with 20s, and I know like the basics, I guess. But I've done them on 20s, and like at the high school I teach, they use 18s too. I'm like, oh well, now I can actually see how it works. I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense now. Just like actually doing offhand with 18s, and like doing your port like the choke up here. I'm like, oh, this makes a bunch more sense with 18s. I can see
yeah.
why they like do it because like it's easier to grab the edge, like they're lighter. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I can understand the decisions now.
Yeah, if we did these visuals on 20s, dear God, I would hate myself. That it'd be really, really, really tiring, let alone, but
Yeah, bruises all over.
yeah. Okay, so here we go. Here's the final question. We leave this for every person who's on the podcast.
Oh yeah.
There's one thing you would tell any cymbal player. What would it be?
If there was just one thing, your crash jokes can always be faster.
Mm,
Incredible.
yeah, very well said. Thank you guys for another episode of the Flip Up Podcast. Tune in next week. We'll have another guest. You know the drill. Same thing every week. I know we took a week off. We needed it, guys. But we'll be back next week stronger than ever. So,
Rejuvenated.
yeah, cool. Thanks for tuning in, guys, once again. We'll see you guys in next week's episode.
All right, see you.